Hello, Meoni here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about changes to Palace of the Dead and Deep Dungeons in general today. And yeah, basically in the next patch 7.31, we should see some changes to Palace of the Dead to make it easier for players to actually catch up. Because of course, one of the prerequisites for the newest deep dungeon, which is known as the Pilgrim's Traverse, being added in patch 7.35, is to complete floor 50 of Palace of the Dead, either solo or with a group of players. This was the actual post by Masaki Nakagawa, or Mr. Ozma, the lead content designer for Final Fantasy XIV's toughest stuff. And it says, in English, not translated, we're planning a minor update to the Palace of the Dead in patch 7.31. This update is aimed at players trying to clear floor 50 and will include adjustments to make strengthening ether pool gear easier, end quote. So, the biggest argument that could be made here is that you're treating the symptoms rather than the cause of those symptoms, right? Instead of buffing the way to actually get to floor 50 through ether pool and guaranteeing that you have more ether pool increase to get enough to go and clear floor 50, maybe it's the bigger picture is why would you make this a requirement in the first place for new content? Because imagine if the completion of Eureka Animos, right? Animos, how you want to pronounce that, was a requirement for Occult Crescent. They'd have much less people involving themselves in Occult Crescent as a result. So I think for content development, it is important to move those goalposts a little bit to keep up with the times. I don't know. That's my opinion anyway. You might disagree. I mean, there is certainly experience, that players are posting about where they effectively go all the way up to like floor 40, then they just don't have the ether pool to actually continue, right? Because of RNG of treasure coffers, silver coffers that they've had on the way. So I suppose one of the ways that they can change that is by buffing the amount of coffers that could spawn, for example. That probably is a actual change that could be made. There's somewhere simple in the code that there's got to be a value that you could just increase the range of, or increase the percentage chance of. I don't see how that would be the hardest thing to do. I don't think necessarily going up to a treasure coffer and getting double the amount of ether pool or greater chance. I mean, maybe, but it seems less likely than just having more coffers, right? But yeah, it is certainly possible to go through there your first time, over level it, and have to turn around and start again simply because of the RNG that you had with silver coffers. So it's not unheard of. And another way to look at this is at least you can get your keener weapons if you want those glamoured outside with ether pool grips. If you want to exchange ether pool, it's going to be less of a hit actually exchanging that ether pool, because presumably it will be a lot easier to go back in there and get more ether pool plus. So yeah, it's an interesting and welcome update. I'm not sure how they're going to approach this. Presumably it's going to be through the actual chest openings themselves, right? But I'm sure there'll be discussions in the patch notes about this. 7.31 should be either next week or the week after. Realistically, I'm thinking it's going to be next week, and things are starting to heat up in terms of details for that. It also brings up the question of, the design philosophy has changed significantly since Palace of the Dead for Deep Dungeons. I think that goes without saying. So in regards to the difficulty, Palace of the Dead, I would argue, is way more difficult of an example than that of the newest one, right? Because they're designing deep dungeons with players in mind now, with a scaling system, and making the actual first experience through supposedly a lot simpler. Like their new idea of trying to get more people to do more pieces of content in the game so that they have to develop less extra pieces of content for different types of player. This obviously is a direct reflection of feedback that Square Enix has been given over the years, where players are saying that not every patch is for them. They will pause until the next piece of X content comes out, be that Ultimate or Savage, and the intermediary patches where that is not a place, not an actual feature, but a lot of the other content doesn't actually resonate with them. Stuff like Occult Crescent doesn't bother them that much. Things like the cosmic exploration on it, isn't as interesting to them. as, you know, a new Ultimate or new Savage tier, so they just don't play the game, and that works vice versa as well. So they're going to try and make it so that there's something in each patch for everyone, which is an interesting and ambitious goal, to say the very least, but it can definitely be pulled off. The thing that makes me most concerned about this is what they said in the PC Games N interview yesterday, where Naoki Yoshida, the producer and director for Final Fantasy XIV, essentially came out and said that, you know, this may result in less content overall if we can scale things, right? Citation needed, slight abridged version of that. But if effectively less content could be developed as a result of more of the same content being put out, but more accessibility to every type of player base. So for your deep dungeons, etc., you will have like your hard mode versions of bosses and things, like with the offering system that we talked about as well, where you can put into 40 offerings to supposedly make that into an ultimate, right? Or ultimate sort of difficulty, and then you could just put 15 in instead and make it quite a simple fight. But yeah, the idea of less content really worries me, considering how the patch cycle lands as it is. If it wasn't for the patch cycle being so long and few and far between, I think I would be a lot more positive about that. So at the end of the day, you know, this is a great bit of sneak peek info from Mr. Ozma, and I look forward to seeing what other changes. Now, do we think they'll do anything to any of the other deep dungeons? Likely not, right? It's probably just because of the requirement to clear floor 50 of Palace of the Dead that this is seeing changes. Although I would like to see some changes maybe to sustaining potions, the amount that you can obtain, things like that from like Eureka Orthos and Heaven on High, for example. But quite honestly, you know, this is a positive change, and I can't wait to see what else they do. But it is surprising to me that we still have the requirement after all these years. But I suppose it's either because it's tied into the quest line and they don't want to change that, you know, because it would break something, or more likely because they want you to experience, you know, the Palace of the Dead, which is the first piece of content, which is your introduction to the basic mechanics, I guess. Anyway, I'm super excited to see what comes in the next few patches, and more information that we get, I'll share with you as I see it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.